So what I want to do first is I would like to give a quick explanation on what the nature of sacred space is. Um, Basically, when I try to define what sacred space is, um, there is a distinction, right, between sacred and its opposite, which is the profane, right? So it's sacred versus profane. And it helps sometimes to define what the profane is first. And what the profane is, when I say the word profane, what do you think? You think swearing, cussing, bad language, naughty things, cheat deals in business, buying things in the back alley off the back of a truck, right? Um, but the actual meaning of the word profanum comes from the Latin, profane comes from the Latin word profanum, which means pro, in front of, and fanum, the temple. Right? And in ancient times, what you had was you had the fanum, you had the temple, the church, the cathedral, the temple to Athena, Artemis, what have you. And then in front of the temple, you would have an area called the profanum, which was basically the marketplace. Okay. And so, you had the temple, which was the sacred space where you would take the auguries, right? In ancient Rome, uh, people would, gather in a sacred space marked out by the by the priests, and basically you would, sacrifice a bull. You would take the auguries and take the sort of guidance from above, from the gods, before every major decision. The Romans would do this, and the Greeks would do this before they went to battle, before they elected a new sort of consul or did any kind of major ritual, to make sure that as a people and as a state, they were behaving in accordance and flow in harmony with basically the divine. Okay, so there's always been this very sort of mysterious and nuanced relationship and interdependency between the sacred and the profane. The realm of the profane is basically what I refer to as a realm of fear, threat, and control. And when I say that, I don't refer to fear, threat, and control as a bad thing. Right? The marketplaces, what do you do in front of the temple marketplace? You buy souvenirs, you buy your gyro or shawarma, right? There's snacks before you go in or after you go to your service in the temple. And it's also the place where you would buy your sacrificial chicken or dove or goat or bull. And it's an interesting sort of, example or metaphor. So in the ancient profanum, I would walk. It was like a farmer's market, right? So I walk up to the goat vendor and haggle with the goat vendor over this goat. But he would try to charge me. I would insult him. Just all the back and forth haggling in any kind of market, even around the world today. So I'm fighting tooth and nail over saving a couple dollars for this goat. Finally, we come to a price. I take the goat with my hard-earned money that I want to get top value for, and no one's going to cheat me. And I'm on my guard. I'm looking out for pickpockets, the whole 9 yards, right? And then I bring this goat across the threshold into the temple, into the sacred space. And the laws of the space, the physics of the space, the quality of the space completely change. Whereas once I was in a realm of fear, control, and threat, I am now in the realm of the opposite. Instead of fear, there's love. Instead of threat, there's nurturing. And instead of control, there is surrender. Okay. In this realm, I walk up to the priest assistant, and what do? I bow, I receive my blessing, and then I hand over the goat. No negotiation, no argument, nothing. I even pay the extra fee. I'm paying you to take my goat, right? That I was just fighting and cursing over in the profanum. And what the priest does with the goat is they sacrifice the goat. They let the blood flow into the mundus, the hole at the bottom of the altar, so that you propitiate the spirits below, and then you dress the goat, you burn it on the altar, and the smoke goes up. Literally, my hard-earned money goes up in smoke to propitiate the spirits in the above. Okay? And I'm standing there, and what am I getting out of all of this? right? I mean, I'm a hard-earned business guy, traveling. I don't have a lot of time. I take all this time and effort. I'm haggling over the goat, and I come in and I completely surrender it and give it up. It literally goes up in smoke. Why would anybody do that? And the answer is, when you step into sacred space, you're in a zone of protection, sanctuary, but then also surrender. And typically, the reason you go into sacred space in order to surrender is to open yourself up to higher guidance. However that comes from. It could be flashes of intuition, insight, hairs on the back of your neck, hunches you get, or just voices from God, stuff your priest tells you. However it comes for you. This is agnostic or sort of separate from religion, spirituality. It's just this is intrinsic to the human sort of animal, the human creature, the human being and soul. Right? There are always times and places in our life that we privately, formally or informally, declared or undeclared, we carve out as sacred, where we go to in our quiet times, away from the eyes of others, in order to look upward in a protected manner. Right? Because when I look up, I'm vulnerable. So I need to be in a protected space. And you take that higher guidance, however you have found in your life, it comes for you effectively. Okay? Regardless of religion, regardless of anything else. And so this difference when you are in the sacred, you are in a state of being sensitive, vulnerable, feeling, and emotional. This is literally how you get the signal. Right? You open up, it comes and infuses you and fills you up. Visionaries, right? High-tech visionaries, religious visionaries, whatever, are often, when they speak, passionate, inspired, infused, right? We say they're brimming, filled with enthusiasm. And without getting into it, what we basically mean by that is, I mean, you could just take the word enthusiasm itself. Enthusiasm comes from the Greek word entheos, which means in, like filled with, theos, God. So when you are enthusiastic, you are entheos. You are filled with the Spirit, with God, or with the divinity. And the thing is, in reality, right, in everyday normal human life, you need both. Right? It's not just the profane and it's all money and transactions and I'm looking out for number one. You also need the sacred, where you take guidance from above on like what the hell you're even supposed to be doing on this planet in the first place. But it can't just be the sacred, because after you get that guidance, you need to go back out into the profanum, out into like what we would call the real world, although both are equally real, and pick up your sword and shield and go out and fight the good fight again. Right? So you need both. Not to put too fine a point on it, but the temple itself, the marble, the gold, the stained glass windows, those didn't come for free. Right? The artisans, the working people who built all of that, they were paid salary. They work for money. They can't work for free. And so it is the realm of the profane that builds the sanctuary. It is the sanctuary then that brings down the insight and the guidance for what else the profane world should even be doing. So you need both. Both are valid. And the trick for me is not in whether one is better than the other. You need both. But the trick for me is in the cut line. What is the percentage cut line, proportion of how much in your life is sacred versus how much is profane? And for me, there's no right answer, right? This is a personal decision for each individual person. But what I observe is that the typical modern, industrial, capitalist, technological, liberal democracy, that this whole sort of trifecta of how we run the modern world, agnostic, right, ends up being in the personal experience of typical individual something like 99% profane and 1% sacred. And for me, if you are okay with that, then that's okay, right? Carry on, no action needed. If you say, no, I want to be a monk, I want 99% sacred, 1% profane. If that's the way you want it and you're okay with that, then carry on. No, actually, continue doing what you want to do. So I'm not coming here to lecture you about what your mix should be. I'm simply saying this phenomenon where there are these two different kinds of space, where the quality of the physics of the space when you're in one versus the other are completely different, and that there are values and benefits and validities of being in either space at different times, right? All I'm saying is that this distinction, the existence of these two spaces is a thing, and the distinction between these two spaces is a thing, right? When you walk through the street and you walk into a cathedral, even if you're not of that religion, you feel the quality of the space is different. So it's a thing. And the other thing to say here then is that in general, in times of profound transformation, like in the time we are now, the most powerful reflex I personally have come to rely on, which is why I'm creating this extra venue of sacred space for everyone. So I'm biased. I do enjoy being in the sacred, right? The cut line is up to you, but I'm an advocate of the sacred. For me personally, the most powerful reflex is that even in the midst of chaos and action, to be able to create the circumstances where you can still, even for 5 minutes, right, to retreat back into sacred space, your own form of sacred space, however you found that in your life, however you may continue to explore and define for yourself in your life going forward, in order to refresh and confirm your sense, your own personal individual sense of higher direction and clarity of mind. Okay. And also just the rejuvenating values of being in sacred space, right? Just to be in a space, even for 5 or 10 minutes, that is not profane, where I don't need to haggle, I don't need to look out for my pickpockets or whatever. That is sacred. So even regardless of getting the higher guidance, because sometimes you go in and nobody answers the phone. And that's okay, right? You haven't wasted your time. It is good intrinsically just to spend a little time in a space that is devoid of fear, devoid of threat, and devoid of the undue control of others. And in a space where there is love, nurturing, and surrender. There are certain kinds of nourishment, emotional nourishment, spiritual nourishment, that can only be had in the realm of the sacred. So we'll talk about the different forms that can take, right, outside of religion or spirituality. And so for me, the reason I'm doing a session like this and a time like this is that for me, the crucible we are in now, within this crucible, for most people, 1% sacred and 99% profane isn't going to feel like the right cut and proportion. Or 1% sacred for most people at a time like this is just not going to be enough. We need more. And, this is my feeling, and if you disagree, then that's fine, okay? So I'm not here to wag my finger at you saying you need to be more in the sacred or else. There is no threat. There is no fear. I'm just speaking from my own feeling. For me at a time like this, I need more airtime, right? I need more phone time in the sacred to be able to take extra guidance, to take stock and get perspective on just out in the profanum, out in the gladiatorial arena, what the hell is even happening, right? And also, I need more airtime and phone time with the sacred just to be able to recharge and refill my emotional and spiritual reserves, from the well springs of the domain of the sacred.